Hey everybody! This is Death by D4, and this is the story of how I accidentally killed my girlfriend's character in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There's a lot to go over, so be sure to subscribe and let's dive right on in. So this story takes place when I was running my first ever campaign for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. To try and briefly summarize everything that had been going on up until that point, a very difficult thing to try and do, the party was basically on the run from the campaign's main villain, which was this soul-stealing warlock by the name of Malvius Nox Finest. At this point in the campaign, Malvius had slain their guildmaster, taken control of some crazy religious organization, and then seized control of the main city that the campaign had been taking place within so far. However, in between all of this going on, the party had been able to recover a specific magic item from him known as the Portal Key. This Portal Key was a sort of magical device capable of creating portals to anywhere in the known universe. However, the Portal Key in itself was actually very difficult to actually control, and it was also currently broken. You see, Malvius originally broke the Portal Key when he used it to escape from his prison within the Shadowfell. And when the party learned about this, they figured what they could try and do is then fix the Portal Key, and then use it to banish him back to some other world. It wasn't an elegant solution by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly was a solution, and they were willing to go along with it. Now, over the course of my campaign, my player count actually increased dramatically, starting with 3 players and then ballooning up to 8 players. Yeah, seriously. As word of my game began to spread around my social circle, a lot of people really began to get interested in joining it. One of those people actually happened to be my girlfriend, who is now my fiancé, who had at the time just recently wrapped up her own campaign. Sure, things were already crowded enough for me already, but I was never going to say no to her, so we made up a character together, and she quickly became part of the group. Now, around the time of her joining, the party had just gotten their hands on the now fixed Portal Key, and they were heading back to an NPC witch that they had become allies with in order to plan out their final attack against Malvius. However, upon arriving at the witch's manor, they were shocked to find that it was completely burned to the ground by necrotic fire. Immediately, the party just assumed that this was Malvius' doing, and, speaking of the devil, they then heard an explosion ring out from a village nearby them. Being the heroes that they were, they then took off towards it, and upon arriving, they found the village was completely consumed by this horrid black fire. After helping a number of townsfolk escape, they then came across Malvius, who was wandering the streets just senselessly murdering people left, right, and center. After a brief exchange with them, the players then drew their weapons and they got ready to throw down right then and there. However, it was finally time for me to reveal Malvius' trump card. And with a loud and commanding voice, he called out a familiar name and summoned out of the blackened smoke and fire a colossal shadow dragon. Oh, and as an aside, the witch that I mentioned that my players had befriended was actually friends with a red dragon. A dragon that my players had actually been able to call upon before when facing Malvius. In fact, part of the reason why they returned to the witch to begin with was to try and call upon this dragon again, as it would have been an insanely helpful ally for them when facing off against him. However, it was at this point that they realized that during the time that they had spent fixing the Portal Key, Malvius had somehow stolen the dragon's soul, and then corrupted it into the form of this shadow dragon. Now, the tables had turned against them, and they had to fight for their lives. That said, when I made the stat block for the shadow dragon, I had originally based the stat block off of an adult red dragon. However, after my party's size ballooned as much as it did, I wanted to make sure that the encounter was still a challenge for them. So I very stupidly just took the adult dragon stat block and swapped it out with an ancient dragon stat block. And that was an insanely stupid thing for me to do. After all, the power difference between an adult red dragon and an ancient red dragon is just huge. And not to mention the fact that the reason the shadow dragons are such a deadly creature to encounter to begin with is because their breath weapon is capable of just instantly killing a character. That said, did I really expect 8 17th level players to really not kill this thing anyway? No, of course not. Though I did expect my party's sorceress to go down during the fight, as she had just rolled terribly for her character's hit points every level. Seriously, I think she had only about 40 hit points at this point, which is just abysmally low. However, what happened after the first round of combat really caught me by surprise. Quickly, the shadow dragon dove into the group before retreating back into the shadows to hide. While the party got themselves spaced out and ready to fight, I had the dragon then use its legendary action to leap out from the shadows nearby where my girlfriend's character had been standing, and then, on its following turn, turn around and just blast the whole party with its shadowy breath. Unsurprisingly, the damage right then and there was enough to just completely annihilate my party sorceress, and they were just horribly traumatized as they watched her die and then resurrect as this evil shadow moments later. However, what ended up traumatizing me was the fact that my girlfriend then told me that her character had just died to that very same breath attack. At the moment, I was just very much like, What do you mean it killed you? Well, as I had failed to remember from everything that else that had been going on at that point, when I used the Shadow Dragon's legendary action to move it out of the shadows, her character was actually close enough to it that it actually took damage from that movement. And I did not take that into consideration before using its breath attack. In fact, for the damage that I rolled, it was enough to kill her by a mere 2 hit points. Yes, a mere 2 hit points of extra damage was all it took, and then my girlfriend's character is now just dead. And you know what made me feel even worse about the whole thing? She had only been playing as a part of this group for like 2 sessions. Seriously, just 2 sessions in, and then boom, her character was dead. Damn, well, as if to surprise no one, at the end of the evening I ended up sleeping on the couch. So yeah, justice was swiftly dealt. Now, thankfully the rest of the party was able to slay the Shadow Dragon, despite losing 2 of their own in the encounter. Afterwards, the party's cleric felt obligated to try and resurrect their fallen allies, but they only had enough material components to actually resurrect one of them. And, unsurprisingly, the cleric chose to resurrect the party's sorceress, as her character was also the cleric's love interest. So yeah, with the end of the campaign sort of looming around the corner, we didn't really know what to do with my girlfriend. That is, until she came to me after the session with the solution. She came up to me in private and she asked me if her character was somebody that Malvius would consider resurrecting. I said of course he would do that. He's the campaign's main villain and he would love to torment them by using you as one of his minions. So yeah, after a bit of work together, we came up with a new design for her character as this undead minion of Malvius, and then I used her the following session before the players had their climactic battle against him. It was definitely a really memorable moment to be had when her character suddenly appeared from almost out of nowhere and they had to put her down themselves. Honestly, it was almost really cruel. Which, you know, I really have to give credit to my girlfriend where it's due for absolutely having no soul whatsoever. After all, I would have never done this to her character. But you know, just leave it to her to find some sort of way of joining me as the villain right before the end of my campaign. In some sort of way, it's almost kind of sweet. And that's it. That was my D&D story of how I accidentally killed my girlfriend's character. Did you enjoy it, and would you be interested in hearing more stories like this in the future? Let me know down in the comments below. If you'd like to support the channel, please be sure to give this video a like and consider supporting me over on Patreon. Patreon supporters gain access to my Patreon-only server over on Discord, where you can join in on my games, and chat with me and other patrons about everything D&D related. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you haven't, and if you're interested in seeing more videos of mine, here's one right up over here. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see all of you in the next video.